So we're just waiting for, I think it's Councillor Compton, that's all. All right. So look, in terms of chairing the meeting, I wanted to allow the discussion and not shut it down. Also didn't want Councillor Halliday to compromise himself with this council. Just going to get some advice from the Chief Executive in regards to the recommendation. Martin, I appreciate the offline discussion we've had as you're happy to move past that in terms of in the interest of moving the meeting forward. But I think given that we've got the advice, it would be helpful, even if just for training for elected members around what you can and can't speak to. So I'm just going to hand it over to Wayne, and then I have questions from Councillor McCann and potentially Councillor Halliday as well, and I am going to move forward quickly from the editor recommendations. Over to you, Wayne.
So I have a copy of the report. It has 3 recommendations, and there was a resolution that the recommendations be released to public. So they can be discussed. However, without context, it's actually quite difficult for you to get much meaning out of those. So we can talk to those, but I would advise against it because you'll inevitably stray into the content of the report, even talking to the resolutions probably.
So to clarify that, the body of the report is not publicly available, but the recommendations are. So if I understood correctly in the break, Councillor, you can still move your discussion forward without compromising that. In terms of next steps from here, is it important that you, I actually can't quite remember who was up next in terms of speaking. I've got Councillor McCann. Are you happy for him to go first, or is it pertinent that you... Okay, Councillor McCann.
Well, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor, I'm just going to remind everyone, sorry to interrupt you, if you could just be succinct with your questions, because we are now dragging on. So I think you've got a couple of questions. We'll look at responses, and then same with yourself, Councillor Halliday, if you could have them ready.
In the interest of trying to find a way forward, that's what these questions are about. What will occur if Council does not support the recommendations?
The food bank will be left with a market rent of $30,000 per annum to pay as per the conditions of their licence to occupy.
Is there any alternative to that without Council passing these recommendations?
That's a contractual relationship, so I believe not. The way of offsetting that commercial rate is by way of a grant.
Thank you.
Councillor Halliday? Okay. I have one more question. Given the discussion or the questions that have been raised around the table, and trusting that the staff do a good job, which I think your team do, Tanya, do you believe that if the recommendations as they sit now are passed, would put the food bank's operation in jeopardy in any way financially?
No, I don't. As outlined in the paper and in previous discussions with the food bank and ongoing discussions, an affordable rate has been set, and this is the way forward that we both agreed on as a way of working through the next couple of years at the community centre.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions on the screen. Councillor Holborough.
I'm just saying, signal I'm happy to move recommendations 35 and 36 on page 9.
Okay, moved by Councillor Holborough, seconded by His Worship the Mayor. A right of introduction, and then open it up for debate.
I acknowledge that we all want to give our organisations as much assistance as we can, and I think the staff have worked very well to come up with this solution for the Kapiti Food Bank. There will be other opportunities to support the food bank further if we want to do that through our social investment scheme and through the long-term plan, and I think that's something that we need to look at quite carefully quite soon as we go into the long-term plan process. So particularly around the COVID response funding that's been mentioned today as well. So I look forward to further discussions in this area. Thank you very much.
Councillor Compton.
I'd like to move an additional recommendation 37, which would be that Council staff prepare a report about the options for Council to fund the remaining $14,000 of the lease agreement.
So just to clarify, you're foreshadowing that you would like to, we need to consider these motions first. It's not an amendment, so you're just foreshadowing that you'd like to move recommendation 37. It's not forming part of debate. We'll come to that after we discuss these recommendations through debate, Councillor Compton. Councillor McCann.
Thank you. I think it goes without saying that everyone wants to support the food bank, and the questions that we've put to staff indicate that unless we support this motion, we will not be supporting the food bank, which draws me to the conclusion that we actually weren't being asked a question that we had an alternative answer to at all, and that I do have an issue with. I am not sure, and I speak for myself, that when we were voting for the council recovery plan, that we were voting for money to go from one council account to another council account. And I realise my language will not be precise enough for the accountants in the room, but as a layperson, it feels like we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and we're not actually making a difference with that money. We are, in one way, paying for it by rents, by rates, and if we were to do it another way, we would still be paying for it by rates. But I don't think we've made a material difference with that recovery fund by effectively paying it back to us. That said, I absolutely support the need to ensure that the Kapiti Food Bank is supported, and for that reason I will be supporting the motion, because we do not have an alternative.
Councillor Halliday.
Building on Councillor McCann's comments, I'm a bit disappointed we don't have other options as well in relation to this. I'm going to look at that. We've been through troubling times, and we've, I think, got troubling times coming with us as well, with regards to COVID and with regards to the result of COVID internationally, how it's going to impact on us. We're already seeing an increase in the food bank. 55 a week, or even a month, is substantial. They didn't pay rent at their last space, regardless of the quality of their environment. By imposing this rent on them, we're increasing their bottom line. We're increasing their overhead quite substantially. My view is that we need to be supporting through our wellbeings our community. We're going to be having a new type of client turning up in this space. It's called white collar. These people are being made redundant. They're already seeing the change in these demographics. I applaud what's happening in the community centre at the moment with the strategic move to be social, and I applaud Tanya and her team being based out of there and working with our community. I think they're already making a substantial impact, and I'm only looking forward to seeing that get better. I'm in a very difficult position here with regards to this. My view is that we shouldn't be charging this group rent in that space. I have various reasons for that. And in relation to that, I would like to move a recommendation that we change the figures in the 35 and 36 of the recommendations from $16,000 to $30,000, with council noting that it will work with the food bank to access funding opportunities to counter that, if you like, in regards to the running of the community centre as a support to the food bank and our community in general.
Councillor, that won't be an additional recommendation. That would be an amendment to the recommendation, and you will need to state the amendment and seek a seconder, and then we will move into a different process around considering the amended motion.
Could I do that then, or should I wait?
If you want to, you need to state the amended. The Chief Executive is just going to comment.
If you move that amendment, you'll have to explain to us where the money's coming from. And I don't believe you would be ready to do that. So if I may, I would suggest that what Councillor Compton has already foreshadowed at least give staff the opportunity to bring you back some recommendations as to where we will take the money from, what we will not do. And I think that would probably be a more appropriate way to get the outcome you want.
Thank you, Wayne. And I was going to seek for advice once we'd had the motion put in terms of asking around the implications for that. So essentially what you've heard the Chief Executive say there is that if you are to increase the level of support, that funding has to come from somewhere, and that it has not been identified where that funding would come from. So Martin, if you could, I don't want to get into a debate between yourself and the Chief Executive. I'm not trying to shut down the discussion, but it's just not appropriate. You have had the advice. You need to make a decision around whether So if you have a question to clarify something, that's fine. But if you want to debate it with the Chief Executive, then that's not fine.
No, I would like to test an amendment to the recommendation, which is to.
So look, while you're waiting for that, I need to just check again from the Chief Executive, because we've run into this at the previous strategy and ops meeting where this table voted for a freedom camping policy to be created with no consideration around the implications of that, without any staff report on the resources required to do that. I'm not, as the chair, wanting to do that again without having, and I did check, I think it was 3 times within that meeting from Natasha and from Sean and others. So again, before you put that motion, Councillor Halliday, before you put that motion, I do want to check again with staff so that the council is well informed when they are considering any motion, what that means. So I'm not too sure, Wayne, whether that's you or whether it's, I see Mark DeHaast is not here, but the implications of putting a motion without the full information behind the unintended consequences.
Yeah, it's inappropriate, as it was in the last meeting, to add something on the fly without having taken staff advice via a report. But it's actually, if you like, doubles down when you're now starting to commit money that you don't have. You set an annual plan every year for a reason, which commits the funding to specific purposes. As this table in the last triennium found out, when it wanted to implement a new piece of work, we had to bring back a number of reports with options for where that money was going to come from. So as Chief Executive, I couldn't accept a resolution that says you're going to now spend $30,000 when we haven't found where that will come from to give you some options.
So could I clarify, we have the $16,000 because that's included in the $250,000 that Council passed a resolution to make available. Yes. It's the difference that we don't have.
That's correct. So we were aware of this issue for some time. Staff have been working together on it. It was in the recovery plan. I'd like to highlight that is because staff are quite agile and adept and have thought ahead about some of these things, and that's why it got into the recovery plan. That's full credit to them for thinking ahead and making these opportunities available. You've heard again a couple of times from staff that this has been agreed with the food bank. They are happy. So it's wonderful that we want to do more than they're happy with. That's awesome. But at what cost and where from?
So, Councillor Halliday and obviously other elected members are listening to that advice. It's back to you now. If you want to put that motion, it is against the advice of the Chief Executive and staff from the funding perspective. But as Chair, I can't stop councillors putting a motion being seconded and voted on. Councillor Randall, can you use a microphone? Okay. Councillor Halliday, back to you.
It seems to have been made clear to me that I'm not really able to comment or talk back or should we say, push that conversation, which I find unfortunate, to say the least. And the CE has, or Mr Maxwell has made it very clear that he won't be supporting that, and I don't quite have clarity around what the implications of that are. So at this stage...
Councillor, I'll allow you to ask a question. I'm just not allowing you to debate the topic. So, and this would be the same in any council around the country understanding orders. Yes. And council processes. So if you have a question of staff in regards to what you're trying to achieve, you can by all means ask a question, but I'm just, in terms of pushing back, I'm not allowing debate. You can, Chair can allow questions through debate if it's material to the... Sorry, he is, Councillor Halliday was suggesting putting an amendment to a motion. We then asked for clarification from the Chief Executive, and Councillor Halliday wants to, in my view, push back or potentially debate that topic with the Chief Executive. I'm saying that's not appropriate. I am still giving him the opportunity to ask any questions if he has, if that helps clarify his position. So I think I've been more than fair. Councillor Halliday, did you have any questions that would help you form whether you want to proceed with your motion based on the advice from the Chief Executive or not?
No, I don't.
Okay, so do you want to proceed with your amendment and test it, or based on the advice that you have, do you want to continue with the debate on the existing motions that have been moved by Councillor Holbrook, seconded by His Worship the Mayor, and then followed up by the solution Councillor Compton has proposed that the Chief Executive has said is an eloquent way to move it forward?
I will withdraw the recommendation, amendment that I was looking at doing. Quite happy to, not too happy about it, but would like to work with Councillor Compton's recommendation in regards to how we can find additional funds.
Sure, so maybe you'd be happy to second that when we get to that. And in the interest of improving our meetings, it might be a good lesson for us to have a chat about how we could do this better at the end of the meeting.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, just moving forward. So I'll endeavour to do that when we wind up. So we are, the amendment has been dropped. We are sitting with the existing recommendations that you see on the table. We are in debate. Councillor Halliday, you hadn't debated it. I am conscious of the time. I'm not pressuring the team, but we've spent almost an hour on this particular topic. Do you want to debate, or am I moving on to the next person on
I'd like
screen?
to make one comment if I can.
So just remembering it's debate.
Okay. And it revolves around how we've come to the conclusion of a $30,000 rent in this space. We shouldn't be looking at. I take Councillor McCann's point with regards to the perception as we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and would have thought that a $30,000 market rent would have been. We should have had a starting point that was at the affordable end, and our grant would have then been more specific with regards to helping a community asset that I see in regards to being able to conduct their kaupapa in the area. But that's fine. I'll support Councillor Compton with what he's doing and try to work through this in that space.
Thank you, Councillor. His Worship the Mayor.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chairman. I want to take the opportunity to congratulate staff for working really hard with the food bank, arranging for them to get out. In fact, the council staff had worked with NZTA to give them the space that they needed when they were out in the wilderness without any roof over their head to provide the essential services that they are important for. The staff were also really good to transition them out when NZTA pulled out their continued patronage, if you like, to be at the community centre. And the current arrangement is something that has been worked in partnership with them. They are really happy with this, and so that we need to have confidence that the food bank volunteers and working with our staff have come to a really good amicable understanding of the seriousness of the food crisis that we are having in terms of people who are unable to access nutritional food. So the arrangement that's been in the recommendations is very clear, it's very concise, that we give a one-off grant and then we look for additional funds. And council staff working with consultants are really good in this area of exploring different avenues of getting funds for that. That's really good. If by chance that we cannot, then there's a fallback support going back to the ratepayer support. It's simple, it's elegant. I can't see any problems with it. What the problems are, I suppose, are some members understanding of how the whole community centre is working in terms of the different clients. That's a separate issue, and I've suggested that we have a chance to discuss that at another time. So with that, I congratulate staff for what you've done, and I support the recommendations, and I ask that you support it too.
So now the names up on the screen, so I'll have a comment and debate myself as well. Look, it's been interesting. I've been reading the review of Tauranga City Council. I haven't quite finished it yet, the workload we've had. But one of the matters that it does talk to was the lack of trust in the staff from elected members to do the job properly. I don't have that lack of trust with Tanya and her team. And part of the questioning that I had was around the work that they've done working with the food bank and confidence around their ability to, from a financial perspective, and whether they're happy with this arrangement. And the feedback that we got from the team, from the staff, was that, and we heard from the Chief Executive as well, is that this has been worked on for some time, and it's even referred to in the report is, sort of predetermined. So based on that, I'm happy to support the recommendations as they are. I understand the taki from Councillor Halliday. I get where Councillor Halliday is coming from. We have many good organisations in Kāpiti that would be great if we could fund them all, fully fund them to deliver social services. And the reality is that central government has a role to play in doing that as well. We've heard from staff that there is funding out there in response to COVID from central government, and I think if the shortfall should be funded, that should be funded from central government and not from our ratepayers that we heard are already struggling. And so again, I have confidence in the staff that they will work with the food bank to access that funding that is provided by central government to assist them. I'm also conscious of the fact that given the other organisations that we have, we can be setting a precedent here. I mentioned the Otaki Food Bank. They don't have a council facility, but they pay rent on a private facility in Otaki, and it would raise the question for me as ward councillor for Otaki whether we're going to provide support for them. Will we provide support for the CAB? I know the Otaki CAB have similar concerns around their position and would decline funding from a previous council for support for the very good work that they do within the community. Ultimately, we are 3-4 months away from finalising an LTP, maybe a little bit longer, but around that. And so I do think if we're going to have that discussion, we have that. It's an LTP discussion based on good advice from the staff, understanding the finances around it, understanding the bigger picture around the community centre, and taking on His Worship the Mayor's point and the Chief Executive just offline around discussing this, more in a sort of a workshop environment around the future of that facility, and that the intention long term isn't for the council to be managing that facility. So with that, I support the recommendations. I thank the team have done a great job in terms of working not just on this report, but with the food bank in the months preceding COVID. So that's it from me. I'm going to hand it over to Councillor Holbrook for a right of reply, and then we're going to put the motions to the vote.
Yes, I'd like to talk all James's comments about the team within council. We went through a really thorough and robust process about how we allocate these funds and how we work with these organisations a couple of years ago, and it was just amazing with external people coming in and quite a lot of discussion. And I think we, since then, have been doing even better work in this space than we've done in the past. So I want to congratulate the team. In terms of, I just wanted to make a brief comment about the comments that have been made about robbing Peter to pay Paul, and I just want to put that in the context of spending about 7 years on the grants committee in council, where we frequently allocate funds for people to pay to hire council facilities. It's not at all unusual, and we've heard the team talk about opportunity costs. The other thing I'd touch on there is that we've made a decision at council about how we're going to run that facility, and we never made a decision to fully fund the organisations to have to hire that facility for free. If we were going to do that, we'd need to discuss that as a council around the table and work out, how that was going to fit in the wider picture of all of our community facilities across the district and the organisations who use them. So, in that regard, I'm completely comfortable with the way these funds have been allocated and with the work the team's done with the food bank. I guess I should leave it for debate once it's moved, but I would advise against the process of moving recommendations to have council reports brought to the council table in the context of meetings as they move forward. If we do that at every meeting, we're going to bog down the organisation with endless reports rather than allowing the team to do the excellent work that they do helping these organisations. And I have full trust that this team is going to work with the food bank to make sure that they're able to deliver the services that they deliver and that we can provide them with the maximum support that we can. And I fully trust that, and I don't need a report to tell me that. So with that, I'm very happy to move these recommendations with the full trust that this team is going to support the food bank through this process and through other funding opportunities going forward, whether that be from us or whether that be from central government or other organisations.
So I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Councillor Compton, just before I get you to put the recommendation that you suggested, I do want to test with you. We have, a report will take up more staff time. We have heard from His Worship the Mayor, and I think, but I'm just clarifying from the Chief Executive, that we can bring this back to discuss with the table around a workshop around the community centre early next year. We don't need a report to do that, and I just want to see whether there's nods from that around that, and if that is the case, whether that satisfies yourself and Councillor Halliday. But I'm more than happy for you to put the recommendation if you, but just acknowledging again that report will tie up Tanya and her team in terms of pulling all that back, and that time could be better spent putting that workshop together. Okay. All right. So I saw you handed it to Grayson. Have we got that? Oh, yep. Something now. Okay. All right. So has everyone seen that? Recommendation 37 is up on the screen. Councillor Compton has moved that, seconded by Councillor Halliday. Right of introduction.
Many years ago, I worked for Alzheimer's New Zealand, and one of the single biggest things that hovered over that organisation and all the parts that made up the Federation was certainty of funding, because applying for funding, whether it's from lotteries, whether it's from the Ministry of Health, all those things, it takes up an enormous amount of time and places a huge amount of stress on those organisations. And I know, because I sat there writing these applications and sitting and waiting and going to hearings and getting that funding rejected, puts you in a very difficult financial position. Just to put some of the things in context, and this is why I was asking the questions earlier, 55 new clients a month for the food bank looks about, based off the figures that we were told, looks about a 20% increase in demand, at least, for their services. In terms of what they were spending on rent and food and stuff, it works out, they were spending about $24,000 on providing food and the peppercorn rent. Overall, to have 14,000 that they'd still have to make up in some way is a 58% increase on those expenses. On average, they've been raising around about $44,000 a year. They did quite well last year with 120,000, but that was very much a one-off thing. So when I look back at my experience working in the charitable sector and being a volunteer on a couple of community groups, that funding uncertainty is just a huge pressure. And I appreciate that the food bank has agreed to the approach that's with us today, and I appreciate the work staff have done there. It's just, from my perspective, we're seeing families in Kāpiti, we're seeing under a huge pressure, and we're seeing families that have never had to access food bank services having to do so because of the impacts of COVID on the economy, because of the skyrocketing housing costs here in Kāpiti. So I think every little thing we can do just to relieve some of the pressure on these community services is really important. And I guess why I put this motion forward is I appreciate what Councillor Halliday was trying to achieve through his, and I was hoping this is a way forward to get that addressed in some way. Notwithstanding that, if this fails, obviously there is a process to still try and address that in the longer term. But I'll just, from my perspective, would like to try and get the food banks and certainty as soon as possible in the new year.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Holborough.
I appreciate all of that, and I certainly am aware, as much as Councillor Compton is, about the needs of the food bank. They're not the only organisation in our district that's facing this. I'm thinking about KYS and the excellent work that they do, and the fact that they also face this funding uncertainty. And I've been around this for my 13 years as an elected member, and as a member of these organisations as well. So I'm really aware of those challenges, and I'm aware that when you're faced with an individual kind of problem, you want to allocate the funding straight away. But we've got so many organisations that we're wanting to support, and we've heard that we're going to be able to workshop around this and find solutions in the new year, which is in the short term. That's not in the longer term. That's as soon as we're going to be able to get anything going through making this motion now and bringing a report. That also wouldn't happen until early next year. So in terms of time frame, there's no difference. The difference is in the process, where we are in an organisation that has a lot of responsibilities, and we need to look at each situation in terms of what we're making decisions about in an organisation that does a lot. And if we take case-by-case basis, motions on a case-by-case basis, and want reports around individual issues, we're not doing our job around responsibility and prioritisation. So for that reason, I won't be supporting this motion. But having said that, I'm sure that we'll be supporting the food bank, in terms of finding that certainty for their funding through the other process that's been described and recommended to us by our staff.
His Worship the Mayor.
I'm a little intrigued. Is the motion saying that we do not go out and look for funds? That we straight away go for council funding? Is that what he's saying? I think the prudent approach is at some stage this motion will kick in anyway if we cannot get any funding from outside. So why are we excluding the opportunity to look and tap into the central government coffers to support this? I accept the staff view that there are a number of avenues to tap into that. Why shouldn't we do that? And then we know that the backup is exactly what Quentin has put up. That backup will happen. So why are we not being prudent to allow staff to explore external funding for this? I can't understand that.
Councillor Halliday.
I have two things. One is just responding very quickly to Mayor Guru. I just point 36, and I could have some clarity from staff would be appreciated. But the funding that's being looked for is to reduce the 16,000 that the council's funding, or is it to reduce the 14,000 that the food bank is spending? Sorry to ask the question.
Ideally, it would be able to provide opportunities to fund the food bank, the total amount. No matter what, the funding that goes to the food bank as a grant from external organisations will support that organisation. We can't dip into their bank details and say, you give us that much money from that organisation. That's up to them. It goes to them to manage. But if we are able to support them, we could possibly support them to get $40,000, so to speak. Yeah.
I appreciate what's being said by Janet and the Mayor, and thank you, Gwyn, for articulating the way you did. My main concern is we're talking about allocating funding, but the only reason we're allocating the funding is because we've set the rent figure. So we're funding a figure that we've set, and we had the ability to set that wherever we wanted to set it. So it's been our choice to why this grant is even required. I'll just leave it at that.
Councillor McCann.
Thank you. I don't want to repeat Martin's, Councillor Halliday's comments on why there is a need, because we do have the ability to set that fund, and I think we've all heard that. There are two things that I'd like to comment on. One is that food and shelter are basic human rights that we should be trying to ensure occur. And we are seeing unprecedented levels of need for food and shelter, and anything that we can do in this particular situation is what we should do. It is not, I believe, setting a precedent for all the other clubs and organisations, because we're talking about basic human rights now, and we have a crisis. And in New Zealand, we often look around and go, we're very, very blessed. And then we have to dig a little bit deeper to see the families that are suffering, the children that don't have enough food, that will not have a Christmas because they've lost jobs, houses, etc. and food. The other thing that I would like to comment on with Councillor Compton's suggestion there is that perhaps it is a report back from Council on their actions to find options for funding, which might include what the Mayor is indicating, that we need urgent action, not just a report on potential actions that we could take, because this opportunity to find funding is perhaps now. The longer it waits, the more funding is used up, and that's certainly my experience.
So there's no names up on the screen, and I'll take my bit and then write a reply for Councillor Compton. like Councillor Holborough, having sat around this table for 15 years, you've experienced them all coming in looking for funding, whether it's the CAB, whether it's KYS, or many of the other admirable organisations out there doing a huge amount of work within the community. They all require funding, and often when that funding is difficult to source externally, they end up at the council doorstep, understandably, looking for support. I absolutely support the work that the food bank do, and I support the thrust of the discussion from Councillor Compton and Halliday, and just not necessarily the way they're trying to achieve it. What we've heard today from Councillor Halliday himself was that it would be better to have been able to have workshopped this. A report, all that will do, will put us back in this same stale environment where we'll have a report, questions, through standing orders, we'll move to recommendations, right of introductions, debate, and so forth, and end up in the same situation we are right now, where potentially some of you want to talk about other options, other funding, other organisations, the use of the facility, but a report won't allow us to do that. It will speak specifically to the recommendation that we've got up there and won't allow that free and frank discussion and the ability for people to push back on thinking on different topics, because you will be in that meeting environment and not a workshop environment. So that is why I don't support it. I support the food bank, and I support the perspective that councillors are coming from, just not the way that it's being achieved. As I said, we've got many other organisations within the district, and I agree with Councillor Holborough that it is foolish for us to consider requests on an ad hoc, case-by-case basis. That is the very process that got us in the crap previously as a council, when we had to unravel all of that and go through the social investment funding process, because council had over many years made decisions on a case-by-case basis, and we had inequitable agreements with different organisations within the community. And so again, I don't support that approach. It is making decisions without all the information, without considering all the impacts throughout the wider community and the other organisations, for example, the Otaki Food Bank in this case. We also saw an example with the social investment funding, which came under huge criticism with the two CABs. And as a result, Tanya and her team, working with the Paraparumu CAB, and correct me if I'm wrong, were able to find themselves fully funded through external funding with no funding required from council via ratepayers. So that was a good outcome for the Paraparumu CAB, who found themselves in last I heard, a good position and not relying on council funds, which then meant that those funds were able to go to other organisations that were previously unfunded and able to do good work within our community as well. So for that reason, I won't be supporting the recommendation, not because I don't support the taki, I just don't support the process. I would much rather see a workshop where we are able to have that discussion and work with staff around what the options are, that then could bring something forward through an LTP or another meeting. So that is it from me. I've got point of clarification, Your Worship.
I just want to know what is the staff's understanding of the proposed recommendation. Are the staff seeing the recommendation as for them to stop any attempt to seek other funding and just concentrate on council funding avenues? I need that clarification. What is staff's understanding of that?
Well, it's more of a question than a clarification, and it can have a question through debate. So if staff could respond to that question.
My interpretation of the recommendation on the screen is that councillors are requesting that staff prepare a report on options for fully funding the cost of the food bank's lease from within council budgets. In effect, the food bank not having to pay to occupy space at the community centre.
If it doesn't answer the question. Do you understand from that you will, if you had any...
Guru, sorry, Your Worship, we just need to wait for your microphone because people won't be able to hear you.
The question that I want answered is, do you then stop any attempt to seek outside funding?
We would continue to work with the food bank as we do a number of other organisations to ensure we are supporting them to access the range of funding that's available. But no, we would not be supporting them to seek funding to cover the costs of their accommodation because there would be no cost to the food bank.
Chief Executive said Resolution 36 covers that, Your Worship. Look, I'm not wanting to turn this meeting into a mess. We do have a question from His Worship the Mayor. I was going to write a reply from Councillor Compton, although Councillor McCann, are you looking at an amendment to the motion?
Yes.
If you want to put that amendment, a simple way could be whether... Sorry, procedurally. Because the other option is Councillor Compton considers to change his recommendation. So I'm just going to pause there for a bit. I'm just going to get advice from Wayne in terms of procedurally because I don't want to make a hash of the meeting. Point of order?
Well, I can't raise it unless the suggestion's made. I've got nothing to pin it to.
As you said yourself, you do.
In fact, I think I have a point of order now. If I might present that.
If you could just refer to the point of order so I can look it up and be fair to both yourself and Councillor Randall.
Expressing a different opinion. Which one is it? Just so I get that.
Which subject? What's one of those?
Yeah.
So, if you're worried that he's going to express a counter thing, that would be...
It's a direct negative.
Yeah. Would be
No,
direct,
I was looking at the one. I was looking for the one where. He's just looking for the appropriate standing order.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've got it there. All right. So we haven't had a point of order called yet because it is in relation to what potentially could be said. So, Councillor McCann, did you want to suggest your amendment, or have you done some horse trading with Councillor Compton that we're going to move this meeting forward? I hope the answer is yes.
Oh, it's about an amendment, isn't it?
I'm aware that if I put forward what I was saying, there will be a point of order because staff have been, I won't use the word conspiring, that wouldn't be me, discussing.
I thought of it by myself.
So I will withdraw because I know that it won't go anywhere. And
I'm going to clarify, just so that everyone isn't guessing, if a member raises an amendment to a motion that is a direct negative to the motion itself, then it cannot be considered. So if it is not, then you can still put the amendment.
The amendment that we're suggesting to move forward, which encompasses both the Mayor's and Councillor Compton's suggestion, is that we report back, which is a less formal term, that the Council report back on their actions to find funding options in February. I don't think that is a direct negative.
So the more succinct way to do this is if Councillor Compton just agrees to change that resolution himself rather than amendment. We'd have to vote on the amendment, move it, second it, go into debate, and so forth. If Councillor Compton and Councillor Halliday as the seconder is happy with that, I do want to note, in case you're thinking that I am being tough, that as someone that has already spoken, by allowing you to move the amendment is stepping outside of standing orders as well. So I am providing some leniency around the table. So Councillor, did I see a nod from you in terms of, and is the wording being changed? So I'll give you a quick sentence to speak to that.
Sorry, I was more looking at revocation of a motion. So we've already got a motion in 36 that the council will look at. Council notes that staff will work with the food bank to access additional opportunities for funding for the purpose of reducing council's contribution to the licence fees. If compatible external funding is not achieved, options for council support will be presented to the appropriate council committee later in the financial year. So we've already moved that. What's being moved now, in my view, is a revocation of a decision that we've already made in this meeting.
So I'm going to need look to the Chief Executive for a view on whether that is an accurate statement of 36 versus 37.
So, Councillor, this is not where I conspire with elected members. This is where I provide advice as requested.
So, team, just in conferring with the Chief Executive, my view as Chair is that technically Councillor Holborough is right, that 36, Resolution 36 does speak to that. However, both lead to the same outcome. So it is my discretion about whether I allow the recommendation 37 to be put as amended by Councillor Compton. Sure, Councillor Halliday.
Again, I just come back to 36. I just want clarity that the staff, are they looking to find funding for the 16,000 that's already being allocated?
We've already had that answered, Councillor Halliday. Sorry to interrupt you. The staff have signalled that they will seek funding for the food bank, and that could be, for example, $40,000. Was not a firm figure. It was just given as an example. So they are not going to seek just a specific amount of funding. They are going to seek funding of whatever amount that they can achieve through the appropriate channels. So, team, I've given you a rundown of the current position. Councillor Compton, it's back to you.
I was just going to say there's a word missing between February and options, which should be on, I think, to make the sentence work.
So based on what you've heard from Councillor Holborough and my feedback as Chair back around that it does actually just refer to the advice in 36. Are you still wanting to put that motion?
Yes, please.
All right. So it's been moved by Councillor Compton, seconded by Councillor Halliday. I'm going to put that to the vote. Look, I've been going so long, I can't even remember whether we've had debate on this motion, so my apologies. So procedurally, debate. I thought you'd already done your right of introduction, so we're in debate now, and I'm going to take the chocolate away from anyone that pushes the button. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, I think it's right of reply. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, and that is carried. Was that a no from Councillor Holborough? Do you want that noted? Okay, thank you. Team, it is 10 past 11. We've been going for a wee while now. I know we stopped there shortly and this could drag on, but I do think we need to take a break from that discussion. So we will be back here in 10 minutes. And given the time of the day, I do encourage you to be back here ask that you be back here in 10 minutes. So that'll be 20 past 11. All right, team, we're going to get back into it now. We've had Councillor Pravanov have to slip away to something else. We've got quorum. Yes, we have. Yeah, she said she will be back. Grayson, are we still streaming? Thank you. All right, team, thanks for that brief little break. It's the most I've had to work my standing orders file. It's much better digitally than it is on a paper form, I can tell you, when you're trying to search for stuff. So we're going to move to item number 8.2, page 10 of the agenda, where we're talking about the Climate Change Working Group Terms of Reference. I'm going to hand it over to Brandy. Welcome, Brandy. And Brandy's going to walk us through that report, and Sophie is going to speak to it as well as portfolio holder. So over to you, Brandy.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for having me this morning, and through you, Mr. Chair, I am actually going to hand over to Sophie from the start and let her introduce the report.
Kia ora. So this paper, as you've all read, brings to you the proposed terms of reference for the Wellington Region Climate Change Working Group, now likely to be known as the Wellington Region Climate Change Forum. These draft terms of reference are in the process of going back to all councils that have representation as part of this group to socialise the draft terms of reference, to note them, and also to create an opportunity for feedback to be fed through from councillors as part of this process. So Guru and myself, as the councillors on this working group, have already had an opportunity to feed into these terms of reference, and they'll then be put to Greater Wellington Regional Council, who will adopt the final terms of reference. So in relation to what I think of the terms of reference, it's important to note that for all of the objectives, small changes to language have been made in order to better reflect that the forum is an advisory board which has no decision-making powers nor budget, and as you can see that information has been provided to you in the report. Importantly to note as well, there is a new objective to identify the need to emphasise the specific focus on benefits of working with Māori and mana whenua, and it's also, just from my perspective, an extremely valuable group to be a part of, and I see it as being vital that the terms of reference allow for a fluid dialogue, creating space for conversation, and something that doesn't restrict the way in which this conversation moves and the nature of it as well. And this then creates a space for ideas and mahi to be shared, which is really important as we tackle this challenge that all of us are facing as being part of the Wellington region, but also as part of this global society where the climate crisis is very much here and now. So the terms of reference, in my view, 100% allow for this, and the purpose of the working group is clear and succinct as detailed in the terms of reference and can be easily communicated to our community. The process in developing these terms of reference was thorough. We did some of it via Zoom, so lockdown lessons lived and learnt there, and Suze Keith, the climate change advisor at Greater Wellington Regional Council, was a massive help for us in developing these. The draft terms of reference came through to myself and Guru, through Suze, and also through Ninka and the team for us to provide any direct comments or feedback. So I have full confidence in the terms of reference and the way that they'll allow us to have this conversation and to continue it in our region, and I'm really excited to see the kind of work and conversation that comes through this group, and I believe that the report fully captures this as well. So thank you to staff for preparing the report, and thanks for passing it over to allow me to introduce it today. So I'll pass it back to Brandy and Sean, and they'll take it from here.
Kia ora, Sophie. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Chair, we're really just happy to take any questions on the report.
Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to congratulate Brandy and her team for doing a great job and in such a short period of time. So good teamwork there, Brandy.
Any further questions from elected members? Otherwise, we'll look to the recommendations being put, and Sophie's indicated she'd like to move them. So, Councillor Holbrook, question?
Yeah, I can't find it right now, but there was something around, in the original terms of reference, it said that other people are welcome to attend the meetings, and then that was dropped from the changed version, I think. I'll just try and find it. Apologies for not being better prepared. I'm just wondering whether it would still be acceptable, whether they're public open meetings, whether other people can attend, because based on particular topics, it might be interesting for people whose, for instance, I'm thinking that sometimes it would overlap with housing, sometimes it might overlap with social.
Yeah. Well, what is interesting is that absolutely, we do not normally, Greater Wellington is the secretariat for the group, and I'm not aware that they formally publicize with an agenda something similar to what we have here at this meeting that's on websites. But certainly we could circulate more information, at least within our councillors prior, and observers are always welcome. I can tell you at all of the meetings, we tend to have lots of officers who are also on hand. And recently, for example, they had people come and speak regarding the Wellington Regional Growth Framework. So they are quite keen to try and link up as much as possible. Observers don't necessarily have any, I would say, voting rights, but because it's, it's not a group that has legitimate decision-making power in the sense of being a joint committee. So, but yeah, observers and participants are always welcome from what I understand. Would you, councillors, yep, they're giving me the thumbs up.
Excellent, thank you, and congratulations.
I don't see any further questions. So, Councillor Hanford, did you want to move the recommendation? Seconded by Councillor Holborough. Right of introduction, although you've had a bit of a maiden.
Yeah, just again, thanks to staff, and it's been a pleasure to work alongside the other members of the working group, and looking forward to the continued conversation and the continued impact that we can make together and sharing the different ways that we're working and different solutions that we're being able to find within our council structures and the like. So.
Thank you, Sophie. So I'm going to put that to the vote. Oh, sorry, didn't see that there. It's jumped up.
I wanted to say one thing.
Councillor Holborough.
Having attended the previous triennium, some of the meetings in place of the mayor for this group, and then having attended the first one of this triennium, it was incredible to see the new injection of energy around climate change and the level of representation and interest and commitment around the table has hugely grown. So I just want to congratulate the group as well.
I hope that was clean energy. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you. So, dad joke. Councillor Hanford, right of reply. Otherwise, I'll put that to the vote. Waived. Put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against. Carried. Well done, team. Moving on to item number 8.3 of the agenda, and that is the electricity contract. And that is on page 26, and just welcoming up Terry to the table. So an interesting discussion here with some options for council to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if Terry had anything to add to the paper. Obviously, there are three options that are available. The recommendation is to step outside the all-of-government procurement process and to run an independent procurement process for the council's electricity contract. I'm not sure there's anything further, Terry, unless you wanted to add anything to that in terms of the that isn't really covered in the report.
I think that the report says it all, so I'm very happy to take questions though, because I imagine there could be quite a bit of discussion about this.
Thank you. So we're going to open it up for questions, and I have Guy Burns, Paraparaumu Ramadi Community Board, first up. Mr. Burns.
Yeah, if you do go for the tender process, is there a sort of medium cost, a low cost? What's the cost as opposed to taking up a contract right
now? So the cost it's a bit unclear at the moment. We haven't, we're waiting for the outcome of the decision in this meeting before I approach some consultants to do that. But my understanding from background discussions is it's typically around 8,000 to 10,000 is a cost for doing the tendering, because there's quite a bit of data analysis, and we have over 240 ICPs, and so they have to model our usage historically and then project forward what the impacts of the different pricing regimes are for our future budgets. So there's quite a bit of data analysis and processing work to do. So, but the AOG process, if we were to sign up to one of the AOG offers, they charge a percentage of the electricity bill as a whole as their fee. So if we don't go ahead with them, my understanding is there's no cost for them having done this work so far. But that's my best estimate of how that fee translates is nearly $15,000 per annum for the life of the contract. So it ends up being at least 3 times as expensive going through the AOG process. The reason we went with it this time was that we thought explore the market and see if we can get a better offer by going through with that bulk tender approach, where they're all packaged up together, and whether we get better pricing. And comparing it to what others have achieved by going independently, it's not apparent that that's been the case this time round. And it's with the advice I've received from several sources is that for organisations of council size and electricity use, it's a bit marginal, which is the better way to go, and it can depend on market conditions very much at the time. Sometimes you'll do better independently, sometimes you might do better through the AOG. But the one thing that the report notes is that through an independent tender process, we can select a range. We can ask for a range of terms on the offer. So if the pricing is reasonably consistent between 2 and 3 years and consistently high as these prices are, we could choose a 2-year term and not carry that cost for quite as long, as the expectation in the market is that prices may start to come off in what will, for us, be 2.5 years' time.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Halliday.
Thank you for this. And the only question that I had was really just a view, really. If we go these recommendations, from what I'm hearing, that just gives us the agility to really respond to what's going to suit us. And what I'm hearing also is that you've been looking at all the other options, and those packaged things haven't necessarily been advantageous to us as we might have been led to believe initially. Would that be a fair call?
Yep, that's a fair call. And one of the other things we've had from one independent consultant is that this time of year is not typically the best time of year to go out with an offer. You're actually better to pitch it around March. Something to do with hydro dam levels and the market coming off slightly at that time of year.
That's great, thank you.
Councillor Compton.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So looking at the 3 options, either going with contact or going for the independent tender would result in us missing our 80% reduction target. When was that target set?
That target was set in 2012, the original energy and carbon management plan, or carbon and energy management plan. I can't remember which way around it goes, but that was written in 2012. I think it was finally adopted actually in early 2013. And the target, there were 2-stage targets. There was a around 50% target for 2015-16, somewhere around there, which we slightly missed. And there was an 80% target for 21-22, and no further targets beyond that up for review as that time approached. As you know now, Council in May last year adopted a carbon neutrality by 2025 objective, which actually supersedes and goes quite a bit further than this 80% emissions reduction target. So one of the implications of this, if the committee were to go with the recommendation here, is that we may need to relax on that 80% target in terms of the time frame that was set back in 2012, and accept that a 77% reduction is a massive achievement, and we've been leading the whole local government sector in New Zealand on that quite substantially, and that there's not a lot to be gained from doing it, really, putting the foot to the metal just to achieve that target a year or two earlier than we might do otherwise. Because one of the things that will work in our favour, as you'll see from the chart in there, 39% of our current footprint is from electricity, from the National Grid Emissions Factor. The projection is, and the target the government set some time ago, was to reach 90% renewables by 2025. We're currently at around 82 to 83%. It varies a little bit from year to year. So that will do a lot of the work for us without costing the council anything. So that's something to be borne in mind as well. So that it could be that we're getting quite close to that 80% within a few years of the original target date.
So maybe in terms of adding to that though, it may be that if we get a tender that comes back through that independent process that offers the opportunity to offset, that the council may want to have another look at that, because the tender process will take us through March, so that we'll still need to come back to this table to actually sign up to that new contract. So would it be fair to say that we may go back out to the market and they might provide us a number of options, and one of those options may be similar to the Contact or the Meridian offer that allows the council to, I guess, purchase that offset through that tender process.
The certification, yes.
So it doesn't preclude that from happening, but we don't actually it means we're not picking it up at the moment through the offer that's on the table. So,
And as you may have noted in the report, Greater Wellington has gone with the certification approach, but that's because they got a very good price offer from Meridian. So there's no guarantees with this process, but if we were to get a more competitive offer from Meridian through the independent tender process, then that's something, as Sean says, would be back on the table.
Through the chair.
Through the chair, I think you sort of preempted my next question, which was around carbon credits and that sort of role, and understanding in a hypothetical sense what the liability could be if we wanted to make sure that we were hitting our target by offsetting not hitting our target, but offsetting where we hadn't managed to achieve it by buying credits. But the fact that you just talked to that there might be options around that coming up when this independent tender goes through, I think it's really good. So thank you for that.
Your Worship.
Yeah, am I correct in understanding we can go on the independent walk the plank? We don't know how much it's going to cost. But if its costs don't stack up, we can run back to Mother.
No, if...
I mean, do we lose that ability? Because your motion says you decline the offer, AOG, all of government tender. If we refuse that, are we stuck on the plank, or do we run back to Mother?
We are stuck on the plank.
That's very important for you to consider. And the other thing, of course, I'm looking at paragraph 47. And the sentence that the stronger case for a more effective response to climate change would be to choose the more affordable of the two contract offers, which I would suppose would be the Contact one, and invest the funds saved in direct emissions reduction. Right? Which means that's more certain that we've got savings that we can do, and we can then invest that into the higher hanging fruit I like. And having said that, can I also test the long-term plan has got two business cases that we've got, which even though it doesn't give us the total savings that the 2013 policy intended, at least is marked improvement.
Mr. Mayor, that's a lot of questions. I just want to make an additional comment back to the first part, and I hope that the staff remembered what your other bits were to answer. I want to point out that the AOG is a 32-month contract, and in the report it says we're not comfortable with that length. We think within a shorter period would be advantageous. 32 months is really awkward in a number of ways. It means it finishes in February instead of June. But also we think that within that 3-year period, the future of TY Point will become more clear and will have an impact on pricing, and we would lose a year or so of that potential, no guarantees, but that potential ability to respond to pricing at the time.
Are you done? So I've got a couple of questions myself, and Wayne, I think, partly just answered one of them. But the first question is 39.2, where it refers to option 1 and the cost of $100,000 more than the other option. If I've read that correctly, and it's probably a question for you, Wayne, but is that a 0.5% rate increase if that option was chosen? Because I imagine that is OPEX, our power. So if I think a $700,000 cost is a 1%, 355 is around 0.5% straight on our rates before we even...
That's right, that's what we're facing right now, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
So that's effectively what's built into our budgeting assumptions is one of those prices.
I can add if you...
Yeah, I think it's pertinent.
Yeah, so there is, so maybe the savings, the terminology there might be a little bit optimistic. I mean, what we're saying is the price is increasing, and it's really whether it's the contact, which is the lower of those two increases, or the meridian, which is the greater increase. And at the moment, we have been using an LTP forecast that was related to the meridian in terms of worst case risk around increased costs. So that's again, I'm not sure what the percentage is on rates, but yes, it is an increase. And through going through the independent process, we may get something that's of a lower level in terms of cost, but there is still that risk that will come back either similar or slightly higher. But hopefully, as Terry said, for organisations of our scale, we're in a reasonably good purchasing power position with regard to the amount of energy that we use, and that's why we think we would potentially get maybe not a better deal, but at least something that gives us more flexibility.
Flexibility, yeah. So I've got two or three more questions. And I think you partly answered this, Wayne, but the advantages of the shorter term is because of the pending decision around Tiwai smelter. Because like normally, if you get a low rate, you lock it in for a longer term. I've done power contract negotiations, obviously at a smaller level, but generally power always goes up. But is the Tiwai smelter the defining factor here?
I'll get him before Terry. So yes, we see that as an issue. When exactly that might play out and how that might play out, we don't know, because there's a lot of conversation in the network about the requirements to upgrade their infrastructure as well, much like conversations local government's having and central government with their asset management. So I can't guarantee anything, but when prices are going up this significantly, we normally would look to avoid locking in for too long if we believe there's a look-through and there'll be a benefit coming later.
So thinking back to our 80%, third question is thinking back to our 80% target, and this might be rats and mice, but with us taking the community centre under control, that affected our, am I correct in saying that minimally probably affected our, in terms of the energy consumption there?
It did. I didn't think ahead to actually bring the numbers along, but it is reasonably rats and micey, but at the same time they use gas heating, which has more of an emissions profile than if they used electric heating. So even given the size of the facility, it's got a bigger footprint.
It's a contributor.
Similar footprint in this building.
Oh wow. Okay. Thank you. The last one was around the energy certificate. So if I've read the paper properly, essentially we're paying a premium for the dearer option simply for the certificate. There's been some discussion in the media from Minister Woods around the merits of those certificates. Is there any comment from staff on that? Because I think that's a fundamental thing for me. Do we pay this big premium simply for a certificate?
I don't know if any of you read the appendix 1, which goes, it's a brief introduction to some of the debate around the merits of the certification approach. One of the key issues in New Zealand, in Australia, they have a certification approach as well, but it's backed up with some legislative force, and so it has a bit more bite and has a bit more effect. In New Zealand, most of the analysis, as I understand it, is that if there was an additionality requirement, then the certification would be a really positive way to go. And what that means is that if a new renewable generation plant was established somewhere, say on the hills above Paikakariki or on a solar farm on Whareroa Farm or something like that, big solar array there, and we bought electricity from that supplier, and it was a new supplier, new renewable supplier, and we got certification for that so that we didn't get hit with the grid emissions factor, then that is adding to the renewable supply in New Zealand as a whole, and that would be a good thing, and that would justify us not getting hit with the grid emissions factor for that supply. And that would be a good thing for us, and it would be a good thing for New Zealand Inc. The way that the certification scheme in New Zealand is structured at the moment, it's a voluntary scheme. It doesn't have that additionality requirement in it. It doesn't have any legislative backup from MB, and as a result, it's a bit of a weak lever. The strongest thing you can say for it is that it's a way of consumers exercising a little bit of market power and is signalling to the market that they're very interested in renewable energy. They're willing to pay a bit of a premium for it and encourage generators to bring forward their plans that they've already mapped out their plans for the next 5-10 years, to bring those forward somewhat. And that's about the only thing you can say. And whether it will have that effect, again, is debatable, because if you talk to some of the major generators in the market, they say they don't think it will have that effect on their plans. So,
thank you, Terry. I don't see any further questions. Is there someone that wants to move
I'm happy to.
Councillor Holbrook?
Happy to move the
Seconded by Councillor Hanford in terms of as seen in the paper, recommendation 50 and 2 bullet points there. So right of introduction.
Yeah, I think we've heard all of the arguments for this during question time, actually. So, there's a lot of uncertainty going forward. This allows us to, if the certification system improves or is seen to be more favourable, it allows us the option in the future to maybe go with that. There's also a lot of uncertainty around pricing and also these other options that are coming down the pipeline potentially in terms of generation within the community. So, thank you for the report. It's very thorough.
Open it up for the debate from other councillors, elected members. Councillor Hanford.
I think as well, with the independent tender, there's potentially an opportunity to try and earmark the difference between spending on this and the Meridian offer or one of the other, or the Contact offer for emissions reduction initiatives. So supporting our community to reduce their emissions, faster changing the council fleet to EVs. And as we can see from the graph in the report, electricity is the biggest section or element of our house that we need to get in order. And I think that through an independent tender, we have the best shot at being able to do that and potentially from this still have some money earmarked to focus on further emissions reductions. And this will be a discussion that we can have once these tenders will come back to us as a council to discuss. But I think it's worth socialising that idea now and bringing it to the attention of all of you. And there might be a chance too that we get a cheaper offer as well. So I just think this is the best opportunity, as Councillor Holbrook said as well, to leave ourselves open to the potential of linking up with community generation, which is something that I believe we should be in full support of, considering the resilience opportunities it provides for us as a district and for our own local communities. And that's why I'll be supporting this motion today.
Councillor McCann.
Thank you. I'd just like to pick up on the word that Councillor Hanford used, which was socialising, and what a shame that we don't own these particular generators as we once did. And I would like to support the option as giving us the most flexibility. Thank you.
And I'll finish off and then right of reply. Be supporting the motion as well from my perspective. If we're going to be putting money into, or additional money, it should be into, as Councillor Hanford said, initiatives within the community, whether it's solar farms or EVs or assisting the community in terms of reducing their emissions and so forth. So for that, solely that reason, I'll be supporting the recommendation. The nerd in me spreadsheeted this myself in terms of doing power tendering, so I certainly know the advantages of going to the market in the convoluted world of electricity units, and certainly would like to think that the team will be able to find some better deals that are more flexible out there. So again, for that reason, to support the recommendations as they are. Right of reply, otherwise I'll put that to the vote. Waived. So I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, and that's carried. Moving on to item number 33. Yeah, take some chocolates, Terry. Not all of them, just... I've got some top-ups so we can pass them around. You can give one to Minka, there you go. Just take one. No, not every meeting, it's just Christmas. Thank you, Terry. All right, team, we are now on page 33 around the quarterly monitoring report, and welcome Hamish back to the table again from our session on Tuesday. So good to see you again, Hamish.
Morning, Mr Chair, Mr Mayor, councillors. Today I'm coming to talk to you, the report accommodates, the quarterly report for the first quarter for 2020-21. And unlike the typical quarterly reports, this one also includes the annual update that we do once every year. So just to kind of help provide some clarity, the reporting period for the quarterly period in the report covers June to August from earlier this year. And the annual update period that it provides information on covers the June to July period for the annual period. Some of those don't quite line up, but one provides annual trends and information, and the other is the snapshot that we provide quarter on quarter. So some key points just to note about this report is that we have looked to include some updates on census information and part of the kind of context surrounding some of the challenges and pressures facing the district as it's evolved. Previous annual reports weren't able to provide the full depth of information, given some of the delays with that census information coming out from Statistics New Zealand. There are a few lags in some of the data sets contained in there, but we've sought to update and refresh them where possible. Another key point of note with the report is that it provides a bit of context to the external users once it is published around some of the work around and changes that you've been briefed on around the national policy statement, just providing a bit of awareness, and also the work to develop the regional growth framework and the work that's just underway now to review our own district growth strategy. And also, I guess the third point just to flag around the report and some of its findings is that obviously COVID is a key event that's impacted part of this reporting period, and obviously that's an ongoing impact. But the report does identify and focus primarily on some of the impacts and early assumptions and anticipated effects it might have had on the housing environment, the local housing market. And so there's some information in there from across those reporting periods around our consenting, both building consent processes and resource consent processes. And it's fair to say that they don't actually reflect the initial drop-off in activity that was initially thought of when COVID first started impacting on us. And that's something that we'll be looking to actually monitor going forward. But one of the things that I guess perverse outcomes that we have identified anecdotally in the report and we'll be tracking further too is actually the impacts of further increased demand for housing and for people seeking change of circumstances, and what that appears to potentially be having on an ever-increasing average house price in our district, and also the availability of housing and those pressures surrounding it. So we are conscious of while that's increasing, that is having a negative and perverse impact on wider social impacts across the district. And those are some of the factors that we'll be looking to monitor through the recovery work, but the housing work will continue to monitor through our statistics going forward. And just to note that we're just about to start the actual next quarterly review period for that as well. So we'll have some information early in the new year about some of those updated housing statistics. But otherwise, I will take the report as read and happy to take questions.
Councillor McCann, I should have checked with you first. Relates to your portfolio, whether you've got anything you want to add. If not, if you've got any questions you want to kick off with first, and then I'll open it up.
I'd just like to thank staff, many of who are working right across the area, which is across council now, for all their hard work, which often goes unseen, and reports like this help bring up some of the myriad of issues right across the sector. So I'd just like to thank you for that. I've said far too much today, and nothing I can say here alleviates the fact that we have a tsunami of a problem, and I commend councillors for recognising that we have this problem, and that council and staff are trying to deal with it. But this report is very useful. Thank you.
I think it's another topic that's coastal tsunami, coastal issues. Councillor Compton.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm interested because you talk about the impacts of. Well, we've got to respond to the impacts of the new National Policy Statement on Urban Development. These reports are really useful, the housing assessments. Do they continue under that new National Policy Statement?
Yes, effectively they carry forward pretty much as they have previously. There's a slight change in that the expectation is that they don't necessarily get published quarterly, but can be published annually. But that's something I'd like to bring back to the table for the next quarterly report to see what the appetite is maybe more widely and discuss internally first about the form and nature that we provide some of that data going forward. But they very much form the basis of the housing business assessment process, which is the evidence base to inform and front foot and respond to the need for change through district plan and other mechanisms available for council.
Thank you.
That's any further questions down there?
I've got one.
Yeah, His Worship the Mayor.
There's a lag in information, right? Here we've got at least a 3-month lag. Talking to people in the coalface of the real estate business, they are saying in terms of price discovery of cost of houses is escalating at phenomenal speed. So what they've told me is that if you want to know the current price, you go at the tender process, the auctions. So the price discovery is at that stage. Let me just give you an example of a house that was sold recently, a 3-bedroom house, 1940 house in Paraparaumu. The assessment that the auctioneer did before then for the price was 580,000 to 600,000, because this house was had asbestos and it was in a ponding site. The auction gave a price of $765,000. So the question there is, given this lag, by the time you come with the next one, it's going to take what? How many months?
We report quarterly.
Quarterly. Do you see that as a problem in terms of reporting for a start, or do we need to be flexible or agile to provide another layer of more immediate? I don't know. It's just too much work or what?
I guess the follow-on question from that would be what would it achieve too by doing it more frequently, I think is the question that you might be asking.
I suppose for our social welfare team and stuff like that to know the problems that we are facing at the coalface for the community, I mean, that will have an immediate impact on a whole range of food bank, and I don't know. That's the reason I asked.
It's not very often I kind of push back against monitoring or against the intent of having great evidence and information to inform processes. But I guess there is a bit of a trade-off there between having evidence and more up-to-date information and actually what you do with it and how you actually respond. So I guess in this instance, the beauty of regular monitoring, and this is going back to the purpose of the NPS, is to support front-footing and monitoring, where I guess you could say there might have been a previous situation nationally where the processes we're doing and the discussions we're having now didn't happen as frequently as they should, even though these issues and pressures are out there and changing. So bringing those issues to the fore, I think, is paramount. I think there's any number of the statistics that we have that change quite quickly, and I think one of the benefits is being able to recognise that they are changing, and also the benefit of over time looking at those peaks and reflecting about why and feeding that going forward. But I guess one of the trade-offs would be if we are looking to do more frequent reporting and updates on indicators and information, it would draw away from that other work and effort to actually take the next step forward, for instance, our future growth strategy and other resourcing available to actually start looking at how we implement those changes to kind of tackle some of these challenges going forward.
I think your point that it would be like James says, you are gathering information which will have limited use in one sense, in terms of planning. But in the social welfare side, I suppose they can do their own response to who comes to the food bank.
And I think the social welfare side, they'll probably hear that anyway directly. Did you want to add something further?
I was just going to say that there's a future piece of work we're looking to do following the review of the growth strategy, where we were wanting to look at indicators and frameworks that support both this work and more broadly. So the frequency and how we look at that could be something we could come back to and look at that in the future, as well as part of the discussion, I guess, that change in the national policy statement for not requiring to do this quarterly, to publish it quarterly, but undertake it. I mean, there could be some flexibility there we could look at in the future once the growth strategy's underway and fairly landed.
Thanks, Hamish. So, look, a compliment wrapped up in a bit of a question there from me, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Previously, the reports didn't have the Airbnb data in there, and we raised that as potentially a bit of an issue. So, a compliment in the sense that I see that sitting there on page 9. The question out of that was, how helpful was that information when the team or whoever provided it? How much more of a context did that provide to the whole housing story?
I think it's useful to understand because it's a relatively new not disruptive technology, but use of stock, I guess, in a new and different way that technology's enabled. So while it's helpful to identify its use and contextualise that use, we've also know that this districts have a long-standing proportion of second homes and holiday homes as well. So I think it's helped add another lens of which we need to be aware of and look at. I think there's further work we would be looking to do in time as we can as part of our housing and business assessment to understand some of these overlapping natures and uses of our housing stock, not just with Airbnb, but particularly in and around support, particularly in Otaki, around the need to support the wānanga up there was identified as another issue in our housing business assessment, and other potential uses that have a need on housing for different purposes at different times of the year. So it's certainly something that we're looking to build on and understand more fulsomely in time.
And it was interesting to note, and I had a meeting with our accountants yesterday, and we were talking about the LVRs and the increases, but actually the levels are lower for purchasing rental properties and Airbnbs and batches. I think it's 20% LVR compared to 40 for first home. It's crazy. Anyway, thank you. So I don't see any further questions. Have we got someone that wants to move the recommendations? Sorry. Thank you, Councillor McCann. So I'm just trying to find the page on my thing again. And seconded by Councillor Compton. Right of introduction, Councillor McCann. All right, so no right of introduction. I'll open it up for debate. There is none. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against. That is carried. Thank you very much, Hamish.
Thank you.
Take a chocolate.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
You too. I've set the bar high now for Guru. Not chocolates need to be bigger and more. So, team, we're almost there. Pressing on to the last part of the meeting, we've got the 2 lots of minutes. Can staff just advise me, should we take the minutes separately, or can we move both separately? So we've got the minutes separately for those that are watching the live streaming.
And in a conspiratorial way.
Yes, with coercion from the staff. So we're looking at the minutes from the 5th of November. There's nothing raised out of that. If someone could move the minutes for the 5th. Councillor Halliday moved, seconded by someone? Councillor Compton? Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against. Carried. And then the second lot of minutes, which is for the 19th of November. Anything raised out of the 19th? No one labelled for doing something that they didn't do? No. Moved again by Councillor Halliday, seconded by Councillor Compton. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against. And carried. Item number 10, public speaking time. There is no one here, and there is no publicly excluded minutes or meeting. So I'm going to call the meeting to a close. If councillors could just hang 5 for a minute or two. I just want to have a quick word to you all. And Grayson, if we could wind up the live streaming. Oh, okay. Is it better that Janice does that first?